illuminating right now, and Mara has somehow curated an amazing moment tonight. She has found the award-winning director-choreographer and former performer who has had a 30-year-long association with Fiddler on the Roof. And the other person who's coming up on the stage is the Director of Education Programs at the esteemed international organization, the Anti-Defamation League. We are so grateful that both Gary John LaRosa and Jason Sirois are here tonight to have a conversation and illuminate more about this incredible show and anything you care to share with us. So come on up.
Hi everybody, I'm Jason.
I'm Gary John. Thank you for being here.
So, when I spoke with Mara, first of all, on behalf of ADL, Mara, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. So, how many of you are familiar with ADL? For those who don't know, it's a over 100-year-old organization. Our mission is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment for all. Just a tiny little thing to try and accomplish. And one of the things when Mara and I talked about what this would be about, it's about acknowledging the reality of what's happening in today's society. My colleagues track hate crimes. The FBI reported last year there was a 17% increase in hate crimes, which is three times higher than the increase from 2016. And in 2017, there was a 60% increase, almost a 60% increase in anti-Semitic incidents. So this is a real issue. And one of the things that I always want to say to anyone who will listen, that's why I love when I get a mic, I'm like, you all have to listen, it's so great, is that whenever an incident like the Tree of Life shooting happens, and the fact that I even have to say when an incident like that happens, I get a lot of calls from my friends because they know what I do and where I work, and they always say, what can I do? And how do you stop hate? And so ADL uses this model called the pyramid of hate, which shows how hate escalates. And one of the things I always want to say to people to really understand is the challenge of fighting hate is that it becomes us versus them, when in fact, hate, the escalation of hate starts with the little things we hear and maybe say every day. Like my friend who's like, oh, I Jewed him down. And when we believe that pyramid, if that goes unchecked, it can escalate then to more specific kinds of behavior. In this case, maybe towards Jewish people. If that person who said I Jewed him down didn't get checked or challenged, it can escalate. If that goes, like maybe then that's name calling. I work a lot with students across the country. And Jewish students in particular, their friends will throw pennies on the ground and say, pick it up. And they think it's hysterical. And when that goes unchecked, then you get into discrimination. And when discrimination goes unchecked, we believe that's when you get into the violence. So what I say to people is, what we all need to do is at that bottom. Like when we hear someone say, I Jewed him down, like however you want to challenge that, we need to confront that so that it doesn't escalate in our society to those acts of violence. And at the top of that pyramid is genocide. And so I always say we all play a role. It's not these people who are doing the shooting, us trying to stop those people. It's us trying to look at ourselves and understand what are our biases. How are we participating in this? Bias is universal. It's one of our basic premises. And it's learned. And because it's learned, we believe it can be challenged. And that's what my job is, and that's why I love what I do. And I have biases, and people have to check me all the time. So that's one of the things that I wanted to come here and impart on everybody, is we all have power, because it can feel pretty powerless when a shooting happens. But actually, we can do things. And one of the things, too, is to get to know people. And what I love about this event, so what I didn't say is I used to be an actor. So anytime I get a mic, I'm just like, please, and like. So I was excited to talk about, because I love using art and theater to have these conversations as well. And so when I was talking to Mara, I was like, it would be great to talk to someone about how theater is used. And so I'm really excited to be here with Gary John to have a little conversation to hear from you. And so my first question is, why didn't you cast me in Fiddler on the Roof back in 2002?
It's true, he auditioned for me.
I auditioned for him, but we'll talk about that after. I brought 16 bars actually. But no, seriously, my first question to you is, so in this idea of challenging bias, what role do you think theater, in your experience, plays in helping to do that in our society?
Well, I think it's enormous. I think the theater is a welcoming place for people, and it's a way that artists can communicate important ideas and educate the audiences. Now, you may say that, I don't go to a Broadway show to be educated, but ultimately, that's sort of what happens. I remember as a child, I used to go to the theater as a child all the time, and that's when Broadway was affordable. And I lived in the area on Long Island, like Mara. So we would go to the theater all the time, and the things that I learned and became familiar with, whether it was, Siam and the King and I, or whether it was Fiddler on the Roof and Anatevka and the Russian Revolution, any number of shows, Pacific Overtures, you just learn so much, and once you're familiar with it, it empowers you, because when something is familiar, it doesn't feel strange, and you're much more likely to embrace it. And in fact, it can go the opposite way. Once you learn about it, you can learn to love it. So, Fiddler on the Roof was my first Broadway show, and this is a show that's come in my life since I was a little boy. And one of the things that you gain from sitting in an audience and experiencing live the magic of theater is that it takes you in, and it embraces you, and it educates you, and it makes you think. And the stories that you see somehow empower you to go out in the world and live a better life.
And I just want to say, I love what you said about when you get to know something about someone, hopefully you can get to love them. And that's one of the other things that we always talk about is we make assumptions about people based on their physical appearance. Like if I don't know someone and they walked in here, I look at them and I think I know them just based on their physical appearance. And so we always encourage people, go below the waterline. Like, well, I just went somewhere you don't even know what I'm talking about. But basically get to know somebody. And when you get to know somebody, it's really hard to treat them without respect. So I love that you said that. So now specifically about Fiddler on the Roof, why do you think Fiddler on the Roof has had such wide appeal? Because it's not just Jewish people who go see Fiddler on the Roof. I mean, my family, I sang it when I was growing up.
Right. It's a very unique and special show, and the show has been adopted by Jewish culture, as it should, because of the story that's told. But I think what's interesting about Fiddler is, as Ilana was saying when she introduced it, the show originally, the producers and people involved were very afraid that it would be so specific that it wouldn't reach out to a universal audience. But what happened was just the opposite, because Fiddler on the Roof is a show that has a story that basically transcends culture and language. What is the show about? The show is about a family. Everybody can relate to children growing up and wanting to be independent, and the struggle with providing for their family. This story is about the circle of family, which if you open that up becomes the circle of your village, in this case Anatevka, or if you open that up becomes the circle of your religious culture or your country that you live in. But everybody has traditions and everybody has culture. So the funny thing about Fiddler is not only is it one of the most beautifully written musicals ever, but it has a story that everyone can relate to. And when Fiddler on the Roof played in Japan, Japanese audiences thought that this was a Japanese show because they related so much to the importance of tradition and the importance of family and the importance of maintaining your culture and not losing sight of it. So I think this show has lasted for 54 years, Alana, and counting, and the fact that it's running here in Yiddish is just a testament to that. It's a powerful message, a powerful story, and yes, it's a powerful Jewish message, but everybody respects it and understands it because it's so well presented and they can relate to it.
It's such a great example of how finding similarities, but also recognizing differences. And differences are okay. One of our other basic premises at ADL is diversity is a strength. We are better because of that.
I'll interrupt you to say one little historical story is that before the show moved to Broadway, it tried out in 2 other cities, and before the song Tradition was written, people were really struggling with what was happening on stage because there were a lot of audience members who didn't understand what the Sabbath entailed and who didn't understand what a matchmaker, really ultimately was being hired to do, and didn't understand the history and the hierarchy within that shtetl culture. But the minute they put that song in, which sort of at the top of the show said, here's the hierarchy, here's the papas, the mamas, the daughters, and the sons, here's the rabbi, here are the other people in the village, it suddenly made it all clear. And once they understood that, then they loved the show because it gave them permission to not be questioning what's going on, but they understood it.
Yeah, not leaving the theater like, who wants to feel stupid? Like, they might have thought, I can imagine I would have left. You know when you agree with things, but you're inside, you're like, I don't even know what was just said. So that's good thing they wrote that song.
Well, it certainly helped you clarify things.
Yeah. So I'm curious, we were talking when we talked last week, I had asked you if there was any specific story of an anecdote of how Fiddler has impacted someone, and you shared. I'm wondering if you want to share.
Yeah, I thought for a moment, and then I thought, me. For those of you that don't know, and most of you I'm sure don't, but as I said, this was the first show I ever saw on Broadway. Well, it turned out that 25 years, which is in a lyric in the show that some of you may know in Do You Love Me, but 25 years after I saw that show, I was hired as a replacement in the Broadway production with Topol. And as luck would have it, I was thrown into the show, literally. In fact, this is a true story and I shouldn't take so much time, but the day I auditioned, I was on stage that night. And part of it's a very long story, but part of the reason I was hired is because I knew the show so well and had done the original choreography and all of that. But the really funny, wonderful little anecdote is I ended up being thrown into a dressing room and they said, this is Jerry Jarrett, who's going to be sharing this room with you. Jerry Jarrett was the Tevye on Broadway when I saw my first show. So there was this incredible moment where, talk about tradition and history, I brought the playbill in the second night and I said, would you sign this? And it was his face on the cover and he welled up with tears and he wrote, Dear Gary John, after 25 years, it's nice to know you. It was a pretty special moment. And another special moment was a production I did at Barrington Stage Company where Sheldon Harnick came to the show, and I had met him. I'd met all the creators over time, but Sheldon came to the show, and it was a very difficult week for me because my mother had passed away. I'm recreating the moment, and I was really, really struggling to get the show up because it's pretty hard to open a show when your family member's deceased, and so anyway, the show was a terrific cast and a wonderful company, and we opened the show and Sheldon came, and after the show I wanted to bring him backstage to see the company, but he was nowhere to be found, and what I discovered is he didn't wait for me, he ran backstage and he was holding court behind the curtain. And so when he saw me come after searching all over in the lobby for him, he did this to me and he called me over and he put his arm around me, and this was really one of the greatest compliments I ever got because it's such an important thing for me to maintain the the integrity of the show, both in the creation of it and telling the story accurately and appropriately. Put his arm around me and he said, "Jerry would be proud." And that's Jerry Robbins, who was, the director-choreographer for Fiddler. So anyway, the point is, this show has come in and out of my life. 4 years ago, I directed the 50th anniversary celebration of the show, which was produced by the National Yiddish Theater, and we had 23 members from the original Broadway run. We had a cast of 90, including Topol, and we even had Pia Zadora fly in from Las Vegas, who played Bielka in the original run, and that was quite a hoot. But then more recently, there's a documentary being filmed about Fiddler, and I was asked to speak specifically about Jerry Robbins' choreography in the show. So this show, that's my personal history, probably more time than I should have taken, but it's very important to me, and the story is important to me because I believe in the message of the piece, and I believe in telling it accurately so that people are educated, entertained, and feel a reason to embrace the Jewish culture being depicted on stage.
And yeah, that's the response. And really quickly, one of the things we found out when we were talking last week is we're both raised Catholic boys. And I work for a premier Jewish organization. And Gary John is like one of the premier director, choreographer, one of them for Fiddler on the Roof. And so it brings up this, we started talking about the importance of allies. How many of you are not Jewish in this room? If you feel comfortable, okay. And we always say at ADL, it's the marginalized community should not hold the burden of protecting themselves. It needs to be allies. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about the importance of allies, and even you, why you as a Catholic boy, why are you so attached to it?
I've done talkbacks at productions that I've done, and in fact, one time somebody said that to me. They're like, "You're Italian Catholic, what right do you have to tell the story?" And I think the reason is we don't need to celebrate or discuss our differences. We need to know that there's a good Italian Catholic boy wanting to tell the story accurately and wanting to educate people for the message of Fiddler on the Roof. I think we both believe wholeheartedly in what we're involved with, and I take enormous pride in wanting to depict the show the way it was originally created and to tell that story to help people not let it happen again, is what I want to say. So I think that thank you. That ultimately, yes, we need to join up. There's power in numbers, and if we can all work together, we can make this world a much better place. And that's my small way of doing it, and yours is actually far more, I think, important. But I'm just grateful to be asked to do this and want to do it in the most respectful, positive way.
So then I just want to end by saying thank you to you for helping bring to the stage a story that I know changes people's perspective and opens up their hearts. And I think theater is one of the best ways that we can get people to challenge
Absolutely.
the biases that we have learned growing up. So thank you for that. Thank you again, Mara.